Hello, my name is Benny Tadella. I am the Vice President of Merchant Solutions here at ACI. And today I am delighted to share with you some of our key findings in the grocery space as a learning and finding that underpins some of the interesting evolution and change that has been happening in the omni-commerce space. Exactly a year ago, James Baldwin here at NRF during the kickoff shared an interesting statistics that showed how the consumer's expectation for superior experience and engagement has dramatically evolved over the past few years. And the statistics say that 83% of consumers say that experience or superior experience or differentiating experience is a lot more important than it was 5 years ago. What that means is consumers, as they engage with merchants, one of the key evaluation matrix for them to do business with that merchant is how they are experiencing that buying journey, how their checkout process, how they select products, etc., is catering to their expectation of what that experience should look like. And at the end of 2019, and mind you, this is before the interesting year we've had in 2020, we've had certain findings as we looked and studied the market in partnership with Ovum. And that showed that about half of merchants believed that their investment dollars should go in the omni-commerce space. And omni-commerce is not just the ability to accept payments, as some would believe, in different channels. It is not just the ability to buy and sell and accept payments in e-commerce versus card present versus mobile and so on. Certainly that is a part of it. But the ability to service the consumer, regardless of the channel they engage with you, the merchant, and the ability to give them that tailored experience that they come to expect when they engage with you in the mobile device, having that same level of experience inside the store. The ability to start that buying journey in one channel, as an example, looking at goods or services, adding them to their card, and then coming to the store physically, as an example, to complete that transaction, or even completing the transaction in one channel versus the delivery happening in another channel, or in some cases even having payment and the journey starting in one channel, completing in another channel, and then when the consumer is not happy, to return it or to refund it or swap it, actually happens in an entirely different channel. And all this by ensuring the merchant knows who the consumer is, what rewards and loyalty they come to expect, what kind of discounts, what kind of prices, etc. Having that consistently across different channels gives you a true omni-commerce experience. Of course, you can imagine that for merchants to enable this, it's not just the payment, it's not just having the merchandise being visible, it is having logistics coordinated between the different channels. It's even being able to think about compensation of employees in the store attendance regardless of channels and in a very different format and way. So omni-commerce has been top 3 investment area for half of the merchants before 2020. For these same merchants, a quarter of merchants says that their number 1 investment area has been payment acceptance. And when we think payment acceptance, it is not just, am I accepting Visa, MasterCard? It is both on the instrument side. What kind of payment instruments am I allowing my consumers to use inside the store? Can they use credit cards? Can they use mobile devices? Can they use wearable devices? But in some cases, even can it be an invisible checkout process where me as a consumer walks into the store and walks out without the goods without necessarily having a specific payment milestone in that buying journey. So that is on the front end, but also on the back end, of course, merchants are thinking in that quarter bit. They're thinking about beyond accepting your brands such as Visa, MasterCard. Can I also accept PayPal? Can I enable Alipay because I am having cross-border transactions in tourists and visitors? Can I think about Klarna or Afterpay because the buy now, pay later is becoming a paradigm shift phenomenon around the globe? Or can I think about real-time payments? What about Zelle? What about WhatsApp as a payment platform? Then when we pivot and look at the last 2 investment areas, connected devices and IoTs, as well as mobile payments, you start to link this to that experience we talked about, which is today's buyers and consumers are tethered to their mobile devices. And certainly we'll say a few things about what this generational shift has been looking like. But that investment in mobile is a critical one, in that I am enabling the mobile device at the center of all this change and accelerated shift even within the store, to say, of course, accept payment, but can I also use the mobile device to enable an easy interaction and engagement with the consumer inside my store, either to look at prices, to look at reviews, or look at product description? Or beyond the consumer, can I actually enable my store attendants to have easy access to merchandising, FAQs, and other help items to easily help the consumer without necessarily leaving the store floor? So lots of investment in the mobile device. You can see almost half merchants are investing heavily in the mobile device, doing a lot of research as an example to understand the buying habits of consumers by looking at which aisle are they spending much time on. Can I continue that search, that look app that they've been performing in their mobile device, and when they walk in, have a seamless transition between that digital or virtual space to the actual physical space as well? But of course, we'd be remiss when we look at merchants' priority, and what they've been looking at is to look at that demographic that has been coming to age, and that is the Generation Z. And we'll talk about the bridge millennials and the millennials, which also have gone through a significant shift within 2020. But again, this data, even prior to 2020, has shown that Generation Z, which is acquiring about 40% of the buying journey globally, is making a huge impact in what merchants are looking for to invest in to ensure that they capture this powerful demographic. 80% of these generation are saying rather than giving up their mobile devices, it would be easier for them to devise their televisions. But more interestingly, some of them even say it's easier to give up friends. And certainly, you have seen and I have seen situations where Generation Z congregate and get together and actually are tethered to the devices instead of a conversation, as an example. So having that share of mind, that access to their mobile devices, but also catering that engagement even within the physical space using the mobile device is going to be critical. And of course, the advantage of these age group is that they are the most engaged in across channels. So whereas some of the older generation, as an example, might have a propensity to always be physical, to always be in the store, the Gen Zs are looking how they can leverage and maximize their experience by taking flavors of different channels. So again, buying online, pick up in store could be important for them. Or completely buying online, and when it's not necessary, rather than shipping, going to the store to return or swap, it could be important for them. And this generation is very privy to the age of internet, which means that from a use of digital wallets, more than 50% of them are accustomed to using NFC payments, either with their Apple Pay and Google Pay, etc. But more importantly, more than 3/4 of Gen Z are users of peer-to-peer payments. And when you think about the paradigm shift that PayPal, that Venmo, that even the real-time payments like Zelle, etc., are bringing to this space, starting out in the peer-to-peer payment, now penetrating even with WhatsApp in the consumer to business or business to business. Again, this generation is going to drive that adoption and the acceleration of that adoption. So if I set the scene that way, that even before the pandemic and the apparent digital shift that we've seen, the world was actually looking significantly like digital swings, and the digitization of the store was going to happen and was happening. But of course, in 2020, lots of things happened, and multiple drivers even accelerated this digital adoption almost by threefold. When we look at what are some of the tenets that accelerated the digital shift in general with the consumer's expectation for superior experience, we look at 5 pain points or pressure points. So first is from a technology perspective, there has been a lot of advancement in artificial intelligence, cloud, which of course means things are getting cheaper, easier to manage, and quick time to market. 5G allowing the deployment of IoT devices, lots of smart devices in and around us, as well as artificial intelligence means we can now tailor a lot of the things that have been bespoke or difficult to decipher from a consumer need, consumer's expectation, buying habits. Fraud, of course, has been important now that artificial intelligence automates and accelerates that. On the social side, with the advent of social media as the hub and as the aggregation space of all of our collective experiences, means advertisements are driving buying habits that are part and parcel of our viewing habits, our day-to-day habits, and etc. So contextual commerce, which means it is not that I have seen something, I have liked something, now I have to wait to actually research it, look it up, find a seller, and buy it. Now, in that viewing experience, in that collective experience on social medias, that now I can easily map out from Instagram, for example, viewing and scrolling, to Facebook viewing and scrolling, to actually buying the goods and services that I have found interesting. And we've seen the end of ownership, especially with the newer generation, where it is not necessarily the ownership of the goods. It is not necessarily buying it and paying it over time, even including houses, but actually subscription. The actual experience, the actual day-to-day living is what is more important. It has certainly started with music and movies or digital medias, but now we're seeing this actually penetrating even other spaces such as cars and coffee and apparels and so on. And this, of course, is managed through mostly in digital realm, which again accelerated that digital realm and the consumer's experience, that frictionless experience. So end of ownership, the rise of subscription. And then, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it, regulations and mandates, policies in different regions have also driven how technology providers as well as merchants are starting to think about this digital swing, this consumer's need for different experiences. Of course, PSD2 has been one of the biggest topics and hottest topics in Europe, with 3DS being one of the components for secure customer authentication, which means now something that has been frictionless and I can with one click have a checkout experience. 3DS potentially can introduce that secondary authentication or friction that checkout. But with the advent of exemptions, with the advent of strong fraud prevention and AI, all of these things are becoming more seamless, more frictionless, and etc. And we're seeing 3DS actually penetrating even regions such as the US. And finally, the pandemic has, in 2020, has significantly pushed again this digitization of our industry, this swing towards the digital, because again, social distancing, the propensity for consumers now to want to order at home and potentially pick it up at the curb, not going inside the store or having it delivered, or even if they go inside the store, instead of having an interaction with a device that they might have to touch, it's a touchless, contactless experience, or even to the point of I just use my own mobile device to scan and go. All these types of expectations by the consumer, again, are driving this digital swing, this digitization of the store. And I kept talking about the digital store. So what is this digital store that we talk about, and how do we think about? And I drew 3 pillars to accentuate what the digital store look like. So the first one is the digital store brings the different channel experience within that space, that physical space. So it's not just a card present space, but it's the ability to have a card not present space within the actual card present space. So this could be either I am walking into the store with my mobile device in my pocket, that sensors pick up that it is Benny who walked in, and he actually picked up goods, and I can charge him automatically to his phone on the merchant app, and he can walk out without actually any payment, physical and intensive payment experience. So that is hence the invisible checkout. But you also have, I start the journey on one channel, such as I buy online, and I complete it in another channel. So I pick it up in store or curbside pickup. And of course, I can have delivery. And the delivery one is interesting. If I start the buying journey at home on my mobile device and I have it delivered, you might say that's full e-commerce. But the reality is, if we really think about the omni-channel, rather than leveraging that central warehouse, if I have a true omni-channel strategy as a merchant, I can look at my enterprise-wide merchandise and I can say, actually, this store is closer to Benny, and I can actually have the store deliver it, which again excites you as a consumer because it's meeting your expectation for fast delivery. It cuts down cost for you, and it has lots of upside when it comes to returns as well. So the digital store has this blurring of the line going on with every channel happening within the other channel and cross mingling of channels, etc. The second one is mobile is prominently placed within the digital store. either to ease the engagement of the consumer, such as looking at price, looking at product description, etc., or even the other way around, as I said earlier, which is the store attendants have easy access on mobile device to have enterprise-wide views, easily help customers, and so on. That just, eases that engagement. The other one is the merchant would be leveraging mobile devices to tailor that experience for the consumer, either by attaching the consumer to the merchant app he has, using mobile beacons within the store to understand the buying habits of the consumer, by picking up on what the consumer's preference is, either by search habits, price lookup, and reviews, and so on. And finally, you can take it all the way to the point of the actual mobile device of the consumer becoming how they actually buy and collect the goods, walking into the store with a merchant application, scanning goods, paying for the goods within their mobile device, and walking out. ACI actually has done this with a few customers, Co-op being the prominent customer that we've done a white paper on about a year ago. Then the third pillar of the digital store is the enablement of digital payments. So buying away from the traditional card-based or cash-based or check-based payment, can I use my contactless payments? So there is no insertion of a card or a swipe of a card, versus as contactless. I use my mobile device, I can use my contactless cards, and etc. Or it is, what types of payment instruments can I use, such as QR codes. Either I display a QR code for the merchant to scan, or I actually scan the QR code on the merchant side. You think about payment experiences using QR code for PayPal. That was a strong announcement within the past few months. We think about Alipay and WeChat Pay, which are again QR code based, as well as using QR codes to look up product details. And then finally is the usage of digital wallets. The Apple Pay, the Google Pay, etc., is prominently at the forefront of the digital store. So with this background, when we start to look at the grocery space, it gives us a very good view of how omni-commerce is happening. And we picked the grocery store for a few reasons. One is, when the pandemic started, while the grocery store has been impacted, it's been one of the stores that had to remain open, given the essential nature of the service of the community. And with that, the digital shift, as well as the omni-commerce experience in that digital store that I talked about, has been significantly accelerated within the grocery store. So our study went to look at, was payments, to look at the grocery store and try to understand how grocers, as well as how consumers, particularly consumers, are viewing their grocery habits, their payment and buying journey engagement, which gives us a lot of interesting data points to amplify as well as to solidify the views we've shared on the digital store. So the first is very real and very apparent that the grocery store has gone digital. So lots of acceleration in the usage of mobile devices, lots of acceleration in using digital payments, lots of acceleration in the cross-channel journeys. For example, more than 60% of consumers or folks who are buying grocery say that they now use regularly a combination of both an online as well as an in-store buying habit. So it tells you that consumers by and large now are both a digital as well as a physical native, which means that cross-channel experience. The other one is almost 20% of consumers have actually switched from in-store to online shopping within months when the pandemic was happening. So it shows you the nature of the current buyer, the nature of the current consumer, that a shift to digital is easily undertaken. A shift to digital is actually imminent, even in industries we might not expect. So that shift is particularly important. And about 15% of grocery shoppers are now buying fewer grocery items by going inside the store when compared to online, which has actually grown, and that is 4 times larger than when the pandemic did not start. So again, that acceleration that says I am decreasing my buying journey of in-store versus increasing my buying journey or buying habit online for grocery. So in total, this shows you that there is a trend and there is a shift in the consumer base to buying more online, or at least a combination of online and offline, making digital offers or the digital adoption quite important for grocers. And this is apparent when we look at what consumers are saying in their buying habit. About 40% are saying, look, I buy from grocery stores that are larger compared to smaller ones, so I prefer to buy national chains and larger chains, and this is combined online as well as in store. But what is interesting is actually a quarter of consumers are saying, I buy from any size of grocers as long as they offer a digital offer. Or when I go digital, when I go and buy online, size actually does not cater into my decisioning process. So this provides a very good opportunity for smaller grocers, for mid-sized grocers, whereas it's very difficult to compete with the large national grocers head to head when it comes to digital. Actually, your digital strategy and how present you are in digital, consumers saying, I don't really care about how large you are. I want to interact with you. So lots of opportunities for grocers as they adopt their digital strategy. And again, when we think about what is digital strategy, digital strategy or the digitization of the store is shaping how we actually pay for the groceries, for our groceries, how we shop, how do we look at merchandise, and then ultimately how do we collect them. And when you take that into consideration completely, so how do I pay, how do I shop, and how do I ultimately collect, 65 million consumers are saying they're actually willing to switch groceries. So if I'm a loyal customer of this grocery chain, I'm willing to change to another grocery chain when touchless, contactless buying options are available, such as I can use my credit card, I can use my mobile devices, QR, etc. So with health consciousness, social distancing being top of mind for everyone, and ultimately even speed being important, consumers are saying 65 million consumers are saying I can change my my grocery chain due to that. But more importantly, about a quarter of consumers are today ordering their groceries online for pickup in store. So they would order online, go to the store to have it, curbside picked up. Again, linking it back to the previous data that showed us that a lot of consumers, when it comes to how they select which grocery chain that they would work with, the grocery chains that are digital, their size probably is not going to be that important. So it gives them a leg up, an advantage, even over a larger chain. And when it comes to consumers, they are doing a lot more digital buying and digital engagement. So all this data together, again, underpins lots of opportunity for grocers by shifting into a strong digital strategy. And then lastly, again, looking at how we shop, how we pay, and how we actually collect grocery, it's interesting to look at the different demographics. We looked at earlier how the Gen Z has been a native of the internet and the digital age. But what is interesting is even in the millennials or the bridge millennials and the Generation X, more than 20% of them saying, hey, I want to use this digital wallets that I have. I want to use Apple Pay, I want to use Google Pay. But I actually don't know how to, or I can't use them. So that gap, that 23% is a gap between the desire and the actual usage. As well as about 10% of these, again, bridge millennials and Gen X, which are saying, when I come to the store, I want to use my digital wallets. It shows us, it highlights that there is a gap in education, there is potentially a gap in technology, and so on, that merchants have to do a better job of equipping their attendants, their in-store folks, so that they can attract more of these millennials and Gen X's and bridge millennials that actually want to use the digital payment. Recently, a colleague of mine shared a story with me, what she encountered at one of the hotels where she was having lunch, and there was another person that paying for lunch, and this lady that was paying said, "Hey, do you guys have Apple Pay?" And the response of the waiter was that we don't serve Apple Pie. And the lady said, "Hey, I did not say Apple Pie. I said Apple Pay." And the waiter said, "Hey, I am new here. I don't think we serve that either." So it is very important for merchants to educate their employees in these new wallets, in these new payment types, and way of doing business digitally, so that they can in turn educate their consumers and close that gap. The big takeaway again for this slide is that if you look at the Generation Z, the gap in digital wallets, card on file, QR code, these native digital payment options are very, very minimal. So the desire as well as to use it is there, and they are using it. So to retain and keep the Gen Zs as consumers, it is going to be very critical that you cater and work out these payment types. And lastly is when we look at some of the key takeaways for 2021 and beyond, there are three pillars again I would highlight. So the first one is the consumer's expectation for that superior experience. And we need to continue to cater that. It's not going to slow down, but it's going to get faster. It's going to get very critical, and it's going to get very stretched in terms of potentially the gap of what merchants can do and what consumers want. So closing that gap is going to be critical, either by giving them multiple options of payment types. As a consumer, I want to use the payment option that I have, digital wallets, peer-to-peer payment types, credit cards, and etc., but also the payment instruments, contactless, mobile, wearables, and so on. I want to avoid any type of friction in my checkout experience, be it inside the store or on the mobile device. So anything that fast tracks and that makes the buying journey quite seamless and frictionless is going to be important. And of course, talking about that, it's going to be pretty essential to have a strong fraud prevention solution with digital swing introducing, of course, the play of fraud in the digital space. Having a fraud prevention, not only minimizing chargebacks, but also ensuring that I can keep the good customers. I can actually approve good transactions, even if I don't have previous knowledge of the consumer, as an example, is going to be quite important. The second pillar is this convergence of the physical and the digital, or the digitization of the store, is going to be a key takeaway for 2021. Starting from how do I blur the different channels that I have, how do I start a journey in one channel and complete it, like buy online, pick up in store, is going to be important, which leads to the statement that for consumers, it is quite critical that they can buy when they want, where they want, and how they want. So blurring the channel so that we're not restrictive and we can actually interact with the consumer as they come and make their choices is going to be important. And all this is underpinned by the Omni-Channel token, which is for merchants to retain control of that consumer data in a secure fashion, regardless of payment type or acquirer or region that they might be integrated with, without being exposed to PCI regulation, as an example, but at the same time maintaining that centralized record of the customer, so that regardless of where they come, mobile channel, again, your website, or your in-store, you can leverage that same token to give them that experience, to identify them as the consumer as they are with their preferences. That leads me to the last pillar, which is technology choices are going to play more and more critical roles and becoming more strategic, even more than they have been in the past. And of course, one is we've seen in 2020 how quickly things shift, how quickly things change, especially in the age of pandemic. Lots of merchants seeing a significant swing of business from in-store to digital means time to market. Reactiveness to the market needs is going to be important. So open APIs, my architecture being adaptable and changeable and flexible is going to be quite important, which also means it needs to allow me as a merchant a level of flexibility and control and option without necessarily putting all the burden of security and mandate, the regulation, all the other complexity of the payment system. So open architecture and flexible architecture, giving me option and control without necessarily burdening me that I get distracted from my actual business of meeting my consumer needs. And then lastly, in this technology space, with the significant and big and huge volumes that we've seen in the e-commerce space, I cannot underscore or emphasize more by saying that non-functional requirements such as availability of the system, throughput of the system, it's just a general performance of the solution that merchants leverage and the partners they work with is very critical and needs to be part of the strategic consideration. Thank you for listening, and thank you for spending this time with me. I'm Benny Tadella from ACI.